Hey everybody, welcome to BatPig's video review of the Denon AVR 2113 Ci. The 2113 Ci is the mid-level model in the current lineup, and this model is one that we over at AVS Forum have been noting specifically as a best buy in the Denon lineup. It's really at a sweet spot in terms of price to performance ratio. It has all of the features you need, including multi-Q XT, which is the advanced room calibration, plenty of HDMI inputs, network features, and in addition, one of the advantages you get over the model directly below it, the 1913, is that it has a third year of warranty, being a CI model. So when you compare the price difference between the 1900 level model and the 2100 level model, this 2113, it's really a no-brainer in our opinion to step up to this 2113 model, because you get that extra year of warranty, you get the multi-Q XT over the regular multi-Q, and you also get some additional features like more sophisticated zone control, and we'll talk about that in a little bit when we look at the back panel. So I got this receiver at Electronics Expo. For those of you who follow AVS Forum, you know that Electronics Expo is probably the most recommended internet vendor that we see on AVS Forum. They always have great prices, they deliver great service. This was no exception for me. And if you want the best price, make sure to give them a call and speak with them, because sometimes Denon polices their MSRP pricing, so they can't always advertise the best price. So now we're going to take a quick look at the front panel of the receiver. On the bottom right, we have this little blue sticker right here, which advertises some of the main marketing buzz features like the 4K video support. That means it can pass through the new Plus HD formats of 4K resolution, and it will also upscale lower resolution formats up to 4K. This is a feature of sort of dubious usefulness at this point, because there really isn't any 4K material out there and there aren't any 4K video devices yet, but this is check off in the future-proof column, so to speak. Front HDMI input, there's a front HDMI input that's underneath this little flip-off panel right here. All of the new models have a front HDMI input for hooking up a camcorder or an iPad, for example. Internet radio and AirPlay, network streaming is obviously one of the most important features of these new models. They're pretty much all, except for the entry-level 1513 model, they're all network enabled. That means you can control them with your iPhone, you can stream music to them wirelessly, you can stream Pandora, Spotify, etc. Advertised as the Setup Assistant. This Setup Assistant is a new feature on Denon receivers that they added recently. As I'm sure many of you know, if you know who I am and you've been to my website, you know that Denons have a bit of a reputation for being kind of cumbersome or difficult to set up. The Setup Wizard has really streamlined this process a lot, because it walks you through hooking up your speakers and your inputs, and it's a real big improvement over the old menu system. And the final thing on the bottom corner says smartphone control. Like I mentioned before, you can control this with your Android or your iOS smartphone or iPad or tablet. There's also a little row of buttons that are hard to see underneath the front display that allows you to tune radio stations. It gives you a couple of control buttons and allows you to access your quick selects. Bottom left here is the power button. There's only one power button now. Those of you who have old Denon receivers will remember there used to be this double power button where one just put it in standby, and there's this little button next to it that turned it all the way off. That doesn't exist anymore. The only way to turn the receiver completely off is to unplug it, and then this is the source select knob over here on the left that lets you scroll through your sources, and of course your little headphone jack right there. For those of you who have seen older Denon receivers as well, you'll notice there's a new change in aesthetics. There's now this recessed sort of glossy front panel that's beveled into the front fascia of the receiver. It's kind of a neat new look. It makes it look a little bit more streamlined and modern with that glossy front. And the LCD display has bigger characters. Although there's less information there now, the characters themselves are bigger and theoretically easier to see across the room. And at the very top there, you see In Command series. In Command means that it's network controlled. You can control it from your smartphone, you can control it from your laptop or networked PC, and that's just their buzzword for saying this thing is connected to your network. So next I'm going to flip it around and give you a look at the back panel. Alright, so now we're taking a look at the back panel of the Denon 2113 Ci. Not much to see over to the right. Power cord. That's pretty much it. All of the inputs are on the left side of the panel over here. So I'll walk you through this back panel real quickly. On the bottom we have our speaker terminals right here. There's 7 channels of speaker terminal. The 5 main channels are fixed. That's a front left right, center, and surround left right. But you can see these 2 terminals over here. They have a black background instead of a gray background. That's to designate that these are assignable speaker terminals. That means they can be assigned to power something besides surround back speakers. If you're only running a 5-channel setup, you can assign them to power zone 2 speakers, or you can assign them to biamp your front speakers. Or if you don't want to run a traditional 7.1 setup, you want to run a setup with 5.1 plus height speakers up front, you can reassign these to power height speakers and then matrix the height information with Dolby Pro Logic 2Z, which generates height information from 5.1 soundtracks. Down below the speaker terminals on the left there is your subwoofer output. There's only one subwoofer output on this receiver, but if you have multiple subs, you can just split the output with an RCA splitter. Here are your RCA inputs. There's 4 RCA inputs for analog audio. The one on top there is a Zone 2 pre-out, and what this is allows you to run Zone 2 speakers even if you're using all 7 channels in the main zone. A lot of receivers do not have these Zone 2 pre-outs, so if you assign these 2 terminals over here and you assign them to power your Zone 2 speakers, because there's only 7 amps in the receiver, you're limited to 5 channels in the main zone. This pre-out allows you to feed a line level signal to an external amplifier and run 7 channels in the main zone and then still run your Zone 2 speakers. Or if you have a whole house audio distribution system, you can feed this distribution system with this line level signal. On the left here, this is an RS-232 serial port. This is for integration with custom installer automation. That's one of the things it has as a CI model. Most people will never use this, but it's there for custom installers. Your FM antenna. These receivers do not have AM radio. If you want to access AM radio, you pretty much have to do it through the internet radio feed. Up here you have a little remote in-out jack. If you have a remote distribution system and your receiver is hidden out of sight in a closet such that it can't receive a direct infrared signal, this allows you to hardwire a remote control system into the receiver. And you've got your Ethernet jack for networking, 2 digital audio inputs, 1 coaxial input and 1 optical audio input. This is a strip down from earlier versions. Most receivers will have 4 digital audio inputs, but they're really pushing you towards an all HDMI interface. Most of your components are going to have HDMI audio anyway, so they decided to strip down the audio inputs as well as the regular composite video inputs. There's only 2, and then there's only 1 component video input. Again, they really want you to use all HDMI with these receivers. On the top, we see 5 HDMI inputs and 1 HDMI output. There's still that HDMI input on the front of the unit as well, so you get a total of 6 HDMI inputs, 5 on the back, 1 on the front, and all the video that's coming in can be converted to this 1 HDMI output. So if you have a Wii hooked up to these component video inputs, it will convert it to the HDMI feed out to the TV. So as you can see, there's not a lot there besides the speaker terminals and the HDMI inputs. The rest of it is pretty stripped down. If you want more legacy input flexibility, if you want more component video inputs, more analog audio inputs, etc., then you want to step up to the higher level models. That's one of the features of the 2313 Ci, which is the next level up. It has a lot more inputs and outputs on the back, and then the higher you go, the more legacy inputs you get. Now finally, we're going to take a quick look at the new remote for these 2013 model receivers. The remote is a pretty big change from previous remotes. They've sort of abandoned the traditional receiver remote, which is just total mess with a million different tiny little buttons where you can barely read anything. They typically do this in an effort to allow you to control everything, but Denon has taken a 180-degree turn with this remote and just decided to strip it down, keep it really simple, and just only give you access to the primary options, and that includes these input switching buttons that you can see a bank of input buttons right here. These allow you to change inputs. At the very top we have a main zone and a zone 2 power on, power off button, your volume button, a channel changer button if you're controlling your TV, and then a simple little directional pad with a menu button and a back button to back out, an option button which brings up some on-screen options, and an info button which brings up on-screen info, your basic transport control buttons, play, pause, forward and back, and at the very bottom you see some surround mode buttons. These are new as of the 12 models last year. There's now a button called Movie, a button called Music, a button called Game, and a button called Pure, which access the direct modes. And there aren't any more buttons for Odyssey control on the receiver. There aren't any buttons for input mode, or there's no numerical keypad. So there's a lot of features that you can really only access through the GUI or through your smartphone or through the laptop or via the web interface. But in my opinion, this is a good thing because the remote is now a lot simpler to operate, and they decided to just get rid of all that other stuff and just keep it simple. And realistically, if you have a serious home theater setup and you have more than a few components, I strongly recommend getting a universal remote anyway and ditching these factory remotes and dumping them in a drawer somewhere, because a universal remote is going to bring a lot more functionality and a lot more ease of use, because you can usually just push one button and it'll turn everything on and go to the right inputs for everything. So but that is a Denon remote, and it is a big improvement. The only downside, and for those of you who've read the CNET review, they noted this as well, the front of the remote is glossy. I have no idea why they did that, because obviously your fingers are going to be touching the front of the remote constantly, so it does pick up a lot of fingerprints, but it's a very small criticism and an otherwise good remote for an AV receiver.